This is a call to order for the March 13th, 2023 City of Kanawha Chester Planning and Zoning Commission. Time in is 7 o'clock. Mr. Deeds, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Waldenthaler,
Present.
Mr. Donahue,
Present.
Mr. Gooden,
Ms.
Ms. Gooden,
President.
I'm sorry.
Present.
Spelling across there. Ms. McDonald,
Here.
Mr. Deeds here, and Mr. Paulsgrove.
Here.
All right,
Mr. Chairman, I move we excuse Mr. Ritchie.
Second.
okay, motion made by Mr. Waldenthaler, seconded by Ms. McDonald. Discussion? Okay, sorry, roll call. Mr. Waldenthaler,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Gooden,
Yes.
Ms. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Deeds, yes, Mr. Paulsgrove.
Yes.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Okay, I'm sorry.
I just need you to do the roll call. So now this will be the approval, and I appreciate you stepping up tonight, Mr. Deeds. The approval of minutes for the February meeting. There were some modifications that staff sent to us, so just need approval on those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Paulsgrove, second by Mr. Wildenthaler. Roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Paulsgrove,
Yes.
Mr. Wildenthaler,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Gooden,
Yes.
Ms. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Deeds, yes, and motion carried.
Now is the time for public comment for items that are not on our agenda. So if you're here tonight to speak to us about an item that is not on our agenda, please come to the podium. The time limit is 4 minutes. Okay, if you will be speaking tonight to us in any capacity, would you please stand if you are able, raise your right hand and take an oath? Do you swear in the testimony you give to be truthful, tell the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. I do. Thank you. So we have 2 tabled applications that will remain on the table along with the public hearing this evening. So I'll turn it over to staff for our first application.
The first application for tonight's agenda is variance VA 23-002. Address of the subject property is 525 Gender Road. The request this evening is a variance to Chapter 1195.04 to construct an addition onto an existing accessory structure. The subject parcel is zoned R3 low-density residential. It consists of 5.05 acres on the west side of Gender Road. Properties to the east, west, and north of the subject property are located in the villages of Westchester. It consists of single-family homes averaging on 0.20 lots. Those homes are zoned planned unit district. Properties to the south subject property along Gender Road consists of older single-family homes that are zoned the same R3 low-density residential. The applicant is requesting this evening to construct an approximate, excuse me, the applicant this evening is requesting to construct an addition onto the subject property. The existing single-family home in the center of this aerial photograph here is approximately 2,000 square feet and was constructed in 1922. The subject property was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1989 as the Parley Happy Farm Complex. A copy of that National Register application and contents has been provided for your guys' review. In that historic listing from 1985, it notes that there were 8 contributing structures on the property. Only 2 of those structures still remain. The house, which is here, and then the garage, which is directly behind the house here. This section of the barn was not one of the contributing properties, as it was not on the property in 1985 when the listing was created. Since then, 6 of those 8 accessory buildings have been demolished, mainly since 2016. The most notable of those structures is the barn that was raised in 2019 that took up the area where the applicant is requesting to construct an addition onto this accessory building in the back. Up on the screen is the location for the proposed accessory building. The red box includes the proposed addition and that existing lean-to that is currently on the property. The overall size of the building with the addition would be 74 feet in width and 53 feet in depth. The total size of the building with the addition would be 3,900 square feet and 24 foot tall. The applicant is proposing to construct this out of metal siding. It would feature a single overhead garage door on the east elevation. Going through the application here, I want to show you some photographs of that building and some really rough sketch renderings of what that addition would look like. The applicant has put together their discussion for the commission's review on their request for the building. The applicant notes that him and his wife spend times restoring cars and traveling the country racing at world-renowned racetracks. We purchased this property for the existing home and the size of the property that was there. When they purchased the property, they knew there were accessory buildings that used to be on it, but not exactly what was there in terms of its character or the sheer number of the scale of the building. The buildings that were demolished were done in 18-19, when they're being finished, being demolished. The property owner purchased this property in 2020. The applicant talks about their goals to increase the value of the property. They like to have a fully painted metal building that would have a board and batten style metal trim on the bottom. That would be in roughly the same location as the original barn. With the project, they're showing that they want to paint the house trim to match the new accessory building. They don't specifically note in here, but there's that existing garage that's behind the house that they'll talk about in another slides here. But unclear if they want to have that be painted to match the addition on the barn as well. So up on the screen is a photograph of that 1922 home. Directly behind it is the last remaining accessory building from that historic registry form. This is an old garage building behind the house, and then behind the garage building is the lean-to that was a newer addition onto the existing barn that was demolished. Up on the screen here is a rough scale placement for the new addition the applicant wants to put on that building. In the applicant's rendition here, you can see they plan on keeping the lean-to and then putting a rough 50 by 53 addition at 24 foot tall on that building. The building proposed will only have the one garage door on this east elevation and the one man door. The rest of the elevations will just be metal siding. Staff went and pulled some of that historic inventory form for the commission's review with this application's context, because the applicant discusses the prior nature of the facility. Looking at the screen here, this was a Franklin County aerial from 2015. You can see that the house, the garage that remains, the lean-to of the barn that was demolished, and then the other contributing structures that were on the property. When looking at the historic inventory form, it talks about the house that was constructed in 1922. It talks about its relevance, really why it was being nominated for the National Register of Historic Places in this top kind of block here. Moving on to the middle block, the National Registry form talks about the agricultural commerce example of the property. It talks specifically about that it was a farmhouse in an urban auto era. And then the last line here talks about the several frame outbuildings, including the large barn that is up on the screen that was demolished in 2018-2019 timeframe. The buildings that are on the screen for the accessory buildings, they were demolished because the prior property owner was looking to buy this property as an investment. So they never actually resided on the premises. They purchased it and they lived elsewhere. And after holding it for 5-7 years, they were looking to make money on some of the property. So they had someone come out and was going to dismantle the barns to sell the barnwood. During that process, the person ended up taking all the structural members from inside of the building and left the buildings there to basically collapse in on themselves. So staff actually had this large building forced to be completely demoed as it was caving in, and it was a safety hazard for the adjoining neighborhood that was being constructed at that time. So up on the screen is some information showing the applicant's proposal. On the left-hand side shows the lean-to that is existing, and then the right-hand side shows the proposed addition the applicant's looking to do. For the applicant's criteria for the rezoning, for the variance approval, staff evaluated the 5 criteria listed in our zoning code, looking at the special circumstances or conditions for the property for the variance approval. Staff does not believe that such special circumstances or conditions exist that are not applicable to other lands or structures. The applicant is requesting to construct a 2,600 square foot addition onto an existing 1,288 square foot building. The 1,288 square foot addition remained after the dilapidated barn was raised in 2019. The zoning standards indicate that any property over 4 acres has a maximum building size of 1,440 square feet. So the addition the applicant's looking to construct is almost double the size of the maximum size that's permitted, and the existing condition is almost the maximum size that's permitted currently. When looking at the literal interpretation of the zoning code, the applicant would not be deprived rights of commonly enjoyed other R3 zone parcels. The property currently has 2 accessory buildings on the subject site, which exceeds the maximum number that is currently permitted. Currently, there's only 1 accessory building that's permitted for a residential property because this property is unique and it has some historic building natures that exceed our current building codes. Special circumstances and conditions do not result in this instance from the actions of the applicant. When the applicant purchased the property in August of 2020, the prior property owner had already raised several structures on the property, including the historic barn the applicant is looking to replace. However, the structure that the applicant is proposing does not match the historic context of the barn that was lost due to the prior owner neglect. Granting this variance would provide undue privilege that is denied by the zoning code for other properties. The property owner had an accessory building that exceeds the number and size currently permitted for the R3 zoning district. Granting this variance would approve a new modern building construction that is not a compatible request. The applicant states they should be able to have a larger building for the fact the site used to have many accessory structures. However, if you look at the accessory structures that used to be there, it included a chicken coop, a grain house, and 2 hog houses, as well as a pump house for the barn. None of those are being requested to be replaced this evening, well as it's going to be a modern accessory building behind the subject parcel. When looking at this variance, staff believes it could adversely affect the public health, convenience, comfort, prosperity, and general welfare for the neighborhood. The construction of a modern accessory building of this scale would put the property into further non-compliance for its National Historic Register listing from 1989. A modern accessory building of this scale would be visible from the 20-plus homes within the Villages of Westchester community that immediately surround this site. In addition, the accessory building, Chapter 1195.04, Section B, states to protect property values and encourage neighborhood stability, accessory buildings shall have an exterior which meets the standards of this zoning code and is compatible with appearance of the principal building and the parcel or lot. In this instance, staff would defer to the existing building that used to be there as being compatible with the subject parcel, and that the requested accessory building does not match what used to be there. Granting this variance, staff believes would put the property into a better economic use than is presently permitted by current zoning regulations. The applicant states that they want to construct an addition onto the existing 24 by 53 accessory building for restoring cars and race cars. The existing accessory building, from staff's calculation, could house 5 to 6 vehicles currently. So staff is unsure what the additional 2,600 square feet would be used for. The property is zoned a low-density residential due to its acreage and due to its acreage of over 5 acres. Several conditional use requests could be applicable in the future. A property over 5 acres in this zoning district could apply to be a church or a house of worship, which requires a minimum of 3 acres. A private and indoor recreational facility requires a minimum of 5 acres, so the applicant or future homeowner could apply to use this building for either one of those purposes in the future. A daycare and preschool is a conditional use for the zoning district. Again, a large building that exceeds the size of the principal structure. The concern is future use of the building and future property owner use of the building. So staff is recommending that variance application VA 22-002 be denied as presented. The construction type and scale for the accessory building is not compatible with the historic nature for the property or with the scale of surrounding residential homes. Questions from the commission?
You mentioned the potential future uses, but any of those will require a variance request, correct?
So any of the conditional use requests in the future for either a house of worship, indoor recreational facility, daycare, or preschool, that would require an application before the Planning and Zoning Commission showing how that use is compatible for the property. The concern is that the building size lends itself to become more compatible by nature by having the ability to house any of those services on its insides.
Mr. Moore, is Chapter 119504 that regulates the structure, kind of specifics, I guess, is it just over 4 acres, or is there a formula that if it's 5 acres or 6 acres, we can have a maximum square footage?
Yeah, so there's a formula for properties that are under 2 acres, maximum of 720 square feet. Properties that are between 2 and 4 acres, the maximum accessory building size is 1,200 square feet, and then anything 4 and above is 1,440.
Okay. And
There
so-
are not very many properties in Canal Winchester that have over 4 acres. You could probably rule them down to a list of 10.
So the real variance request here in this particular application is the square footage?
It would be for the square footage, but staff also believes that the construction type of the building is not compatible with the subject property. That would be something that would be up to the Planning and Zoning Commission's interpretation of that section of the code to see if that would be something that is also being achieved or not.
So I have a question regarding the commercial use of this property. It states, the scale of this facility addition may imply a commercial operation that would take place in the middle of a residential district. What is our code on commercial use or commercial businesses in a residential neighborhood?
Yeah, so a residential property can have a home occupation if the home occupation is taking up less than 200 square feet of the principal dwelling. Home occupations are not permitted in accessory buildings.
Okay.
So the concern with that statement for the commercial operation in this parcel goes back to the applicant's statement. That's right here on the second paragraph, that they restore cars and they race cars around world-renowned race tracks. And then they further saying that they have to rent shop space to work on projects. So that leaves staff to believe that is a potential for a commercial operation that will be happening in this facility. The applicant doesn't state what that is or if it is, but if you're spending money to rent shop space and want to build a 2,600 square foot addition onto a building, that brings that into question.
Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant present? Please.
Morning. Sorry, it's been a long day. Good evening.
If it's your morning, we're in trouble.
Oh no, that was my newborn son that just left. It's been an evening. My My name is Emmanuel. My wife and I bought 525, moving out of the city, mainly because we were, getting ready to have our son. We were planning ahead and wanted to be in a better school district and everything like that. Downtown, we were lucky enough when we first bought our first home, we found a home that was, had a 1,400 square foot concrete garage in Franklinton, and it was, fine for her and I, but raising a son, we don't want to do that in downtown Columbus, so we moved out here. The worries about the commercial application and things like that. I do rent shop space right now as behind my work. I'm a general contractor, work all over Columbus, Canal, Winchester, and things like that. The shop space I work and I rent right now is owned by the company that owns my the company space that we use for our commercial for the general contracting business. So I sublet it from him. It is for my wife and I's use. As I've mentioned in here, we rebuild and race cars. That is a project of our own. I was a mechanic for a long time in my life before I got into air traffic control, and then later became a general contractor. We have roughly 8 cars right now that are ours. They're not working on other people's cars. Genuinely, honestly, don't have the time to work on other people's projects between our own and raising a son, helping run a business. Right now, the outbuilding, the lean-to, is basically full of lawn equipment. It's on 5 acres. I try really hard to maintain those 5 acres. It has been overgrown. When we bought the house, you couldn't even see the house. So it's been a lot of yard work and just constantly, I guess I got to buy this thing because I'm going to constantly be doing this to try to maintain the yard. We actually had one of the neighbors whose houses backs up facing the lean-to reach out to Andrew, and he sent that conversation to me. I was unaware of it. He apologized for not being here tonight, but was in favor of being able to build the building. Said, incorporating the other structure and painting it and the current structure. Our plan, I didn't realize I didn't have it in there, is the small, the little carriage house that was kind of a garage. The low ceiling height doesn't really allow modern vehicles, is to be painted to match the new structure along with the new gutters and soffit that will be going on the house. The barn was there and was much more sizable than what I'm looking to build. I would love to build a barn that looked like a 100-year-old barn, but cost of materials, cost of labor, and things like that, it's just, it would cost more than the property at that point, especially with wood prices that they currently are. So, driving around Gender and Lithopolis Road and things like that, looking at other structures, matching what they have, making it look nice with the board and batten trim, and just trying to give it a nice feeling, something that everyone wants to, doesn't mind looking at. I went through my bordering properties list that got the letters and actually went door to door to talk to neighbors and see what they thought, and they are all happy with how much we've done on on the house and the property, clearing it out, trimming up the trees, and the general progress on the property. No one had anything negative to say about the idea of the house or the new barn. They all understand, it's 5 acres and it is old growth trees basically all the way around where the barn is. Not a lot of houses actually look at the barn. Along the north side, there's a big long ridge, 50-foot trees. Backside, there's a big hill, trees along the back. And then along this left side is about 10 peach trees that once they are in bloom and full for the summer, they also don't really see the barn. There's not a lot of, if you were standing on the southeast driveway, you would see the barn. But a lot of it, once it's springtime, is filled in. You don't really see it. Talking to the neighbors, their only wish is I don't sell the property off to any more home builders because they don't want any more subdivision behind them. But other than that, my wife and I plan on being in this house, you know, we plan on raising our son there. And, you know, right now, when I want to go work on my projects, it is a 30-minute drive there, work for a while, 30-minute drive back, and a bunch of time wasted back and forth. I'd much rather, you know, get to be home, help my wife with our son, and as he gets older, be able to have him in the garage with me at a, you know, at a reasonable rate and share my hobbies with him and continue what we do. On top of that, it's also, would be nice to be able to store vehicles inside, and including my trailer. I had my truck stolen out of my driveway, that would have been spring 21. They stole my work truck right out of my driveway. So it's kind of the idea of being able to park my vehicles inside, secure, locked, alarmed, that kind of thing. No, I think it would help the curb appeal and just be nice to have everything tidied up and inside.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
I do. So you said that the building that you wanted to build is smaller than the
The
barn
ori-
that was there? Because
The
it seems
original,
larger.
the original barn, the footings are still there from that barn. That barn was 65 feet wide, where this would be 50. And then
Okay.
it was 53 feet deep, and then it had an overhang as well that was, it wasn't technically, it had like a lean-to off the back of it that actually made it 60 feet. So it was, the original barn not only had a higher roof line, but was actually 10 foot wider and 10 foot deeper. So this would be a little bit smaller, much less roof line, and the roof line is designed to build off the lean-to's roof line, so it's a nice even roof line that looks a little bit more appealing. Because you can see there on the left side how it kind of just falls off there. I'm trying to make a nice linear looking building. And then with everything else cleared out, I mean, there's a lot of open space. And it's a significantly smaller structure. And it will, you know, once everything's painted, everything will look nice, neat, cohesive. I'm just, you know, obviously I've spent a large sum of money on this house and continue to put more into it, and I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna jeopardize my property value by putting an ugly structure there. Yeah.
So how do you respond to the thought that it's not going to look like the historic barn that was there? Are there other materials that you considered that might bring that more into cohesion?
So my plan, or my initial plan here, is that it will be still in the kind of monochromatic painting style that you would see a barn, bringing the board and batten up a bit, kind of is reminiscent of a lot of trim you would see on barns. Honestly, I went with a lot of this design based on the new build. There's a brand new pole barn that was built on Lithopolis right across from the school. Is that Lithopolis? Sorry, yeah, it's Lithopolis Road. Kind of went with their design and how that looked, and the other metal structures along Gender Road. I kind of went with those, but then kind of dressed them up a bit, doing the big trim pieces on the corners and the runners below the soffits and everything, kind of mimicking the original barn aesthetic, you know, the red barn with the white trim that comes down and everything. We're just doing it in a little bit more modern color that was going to match the rest of the trim and things that we want to do with the house.
Thank you.
Do you intend to run the business out of this?
Absolutely not. I don't have time for this. Speaking bluntly, I don't have time to do anything like that.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Will the proposed construction affect any of the old growth trees?
No, absolutely not. It's part of the charm that we love about the house. All we've done is trim them back from the house because it was impeding on the slate roof. But other than that, we absolutely love the giant trees and want to keep them as much as we can because it's when they're full in the summer and stuff, it is so peaceful back there.
I happened to be out traveling this past weekend and saw this style of building that had kind of a raised center section, more reminiscent of the older structures. I don't know if that's...
That was kind of where I was going, was the original barn structures that, you would have the pull through for your main hallway through like the stalls, and then letting it bleed down to where the, if it was a horse barn, it would bleed down to the stalls. That kind of design is where I was going with that, and trying to make it a nice symmetrical roof line, tying in the old building. This is kind of the roof line we ended up with, just because I was looking for a nice clean look without it just being, oh, we stuck a thing to the side of this. We're trying to make it all look
Right.
as it should.
This actually had, where you see the trusses around it go about a third of the way down, and that whole center section was
Yeah.
elevated a couple additional feet to make it, again, kind of aesthetically look a little bit more like an older architecture versus,
Like a hayloft almost.
yeah.
My only concern with doing that was the roof line and the height. I didn't want to go above the tree line. Right with the trees that are along the back of it, they're not quite nearly as tall as the ones at the front of the property. My worry was making too tall of a building, and that
Right.
doing that design just kind of elevates the whole peak. And then if I lower the rest of it to bring the top, leave the top where it is and lower the rest of it, then it's hard to have the lifts. I have a few lifts for the vehicles for storage and things like that, just to organize in there and keep a nice tidy shop.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Is this your ideal size or your maximum size? How did you arrive at that size?
My original size, coming up with this size is based off two things. The building that I currently rent now, based off its size, which is 45 by 45, just kind of based off that. I got the depth because I was just trying to match the structure that's there. The lean-to is it's actually 52 feet deep. And that portion of it will be not finished. It's going to stay a gravel floor, and that's just going to be for storing tractors and implements and things like that. And then the other portion of it was based off the footer that was there from the old barn, just to give myself some kind of reference of, okay, this was here, this was okay at one point. I don't need quite this much of, the 60 foot. So I pulled that back in a little bit and just kind of based it off what I was currently using, how well it worked for me, and then what was there, and how do I make those two numbers work together.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Do I need to sign this?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay, sorry.
So this is a variance, so I will now open it up for public hearing. Need a motion to close.
Mr. Chairman, seeing no rush to the podium, I move we close public hearing.
Second. Roll call. All right, Mr. Waldenthaler,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes?
Ms. Gooden,
Yes.
Ms. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Deeds, yes, Mr. Paulsgrove.
So my comments would be, the size, is the reason for the variance, and I do agree with staff's write-up about potential future use concerns or future uses that would be applicable to the property. I would also argue that we have many of those similar uses sprinkled around other parts of Westchester that were, in my opinion, planned appropriately. As you can see from the 2015 photo to now, there's been residential development around the property that wasn't there before. And I think in this scenario, it's an improvement to the property in terms of, bringing back or tearing down older buildings and bringing back a structure that would be somewhat identifiable with the property. The historic, mention of the historic landmarks and registry and things of that nature, I think that property in and of itself that's been there since the early 20s has seen obviously new growth around it. But I think this is this is an improvement to the property, while I also respect the fact that if we approve a variance, it stays with the property, but future conditional uses would need to come back before the commission for anything else that would want to go into that property. So that's my comment.
I would tend to agree with you, Mr. President, except I'm concerned about if we would do any kind of approval, I would want to write into the thing that we get a little more of what the building's going to look like. I mean, if it's this gray thing that we're being shown on the screen right now, I would be a little, I object to it. I mean, the initial thought of the type of siding he wants to put on it, but I like his thought of changing the color, trying to get back to more of what would have been found on that original barn.
First time doing this, sorry. And I'm open to that as well. This was just, a rendering to show kind of the thought process and a rough idea of where we were. Obviously, full drawings and things like that would be complete with a permit, detailing the products that we're using and everything like that. This is limited art ability on my behalf. And this is the rendering and everything that I walked the neighborhood with, showing them, I had my iPad with me showing them, hey, this is what we're looking at building. I have a glowing, conversation with one of my, the main properties that would see this. They were happy with what it looked like and completely, they didn't have any real big concerns at all. And that was actually a conversation they had with Andrew, and he just happened to fill me in that he had that conversation with Andrew, apologizing that he wasn't here tonight. I'm happy to share that with you guys if you need it. But yeah, I'm definitely open to making sure that it is of the correct aesthetic that would lend well to the look of the look of the barn and the look of the property, tying it all together and making it more cohesive.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And I guess just the 2 cents as well, just, sometimes you can put cupolas on, you can do other details that actually make it more barn-like versus more little
Yeah.
building-like.
Yeah,
And
I love
think-
the idea of a cupola. Like I said before, my main concern was I just didn't want to encroach on too tall, but I grew up in Delaware County and in a much more kind of farm home, and, weather vane and cupola and all that is right up my alley. Just wasn't too sure, adding unnecessary height or not, if that was one way or the other, so.
So, Mr. Moore, since this is a variance request and we put conditions in as it relates to building materials and aesthetics that could be reviewed by staff, is that appropriate in this type of application?
Yeah, if the commission wants to provide feedback on color to make it look more accurate, to provide more architectural details that makes their feeling on the application more comfortable, that's something that staff would be willing to help communicate with the applicant during the building permit process. The only hesitancy I would have on the architectural features is scale is really important when it comes to a cupola on a building.
Oh yeah, it very easily look at very out of place.
It could look
One by one.
really small really quickly, and that's something that would be just my concern on working with the applicant directly, is I could give him my opinion on if it's appropriately scaled, he can give me his opinion, and when it becomes a two-way discussion, I want to make sure the commission would be comfortable with that ultimately resting, on staff's shoulders on what's appropriate, or, if you want the applicant to come back next month with maybe a revised drawing that shows more details, if he's willing to do that, I think that's something you guys could discuss with him. I don't know if he has, the materials laying in his yard to build it tomorrow or not, but just something to consider.
Currently do not have materials laying in my yard, thank goodness.
So it's a discussion of whether we approve with condition or request a table and get the additional details and then move forward.
Yeah, and I think having that, asking the applicant would be helpful on his behalf as well.
So would you prefer us to table, or would you prefer to have dialogue with us and we write in a condition in this approval, giving staff some flexibility to work with you with some of the things that Mr. Wildenthaler, Mr. Deeds, and Ms. McDonald have brought up in terms of the architectural layout and colors?
Well, honestly, at this point, we'd be really, you know, with the weather changing and everything, we'd be excited to get started on the barn, and it'd be, you know, a little let down to table this for another 30 days and push a start date even further out. But you know, I'm open to making any changes aesthetically, and I think, you know, basically anything that gets written in, you know, I don't really have a huge concern in the, you know, all the the aesthetic changes that you guys have been talking about. None of those are concerning to me, you know, adjusting the color, adding a cupola. None of that is, you know, oh no, heartbreaking type thing. It is, it's all very understandable and agreeable. So I would think whichever path would lead to being able to kind of start moving forward with the project, I think would be the best route. Just as we start getting into the building season, we don't want to get buried with, you know, long waits for materials and concrete and all that kind of thing. As being in the business industry, my pace is going to be picking up as well at work, and just trying to make sure we stay on top of everything.
Thank you.
So just a few comments from my seat. You know, I think it's a very large barn, but I think that's what was pretty much there. I like the fact that it'll somewhat bring back the look of the farm, so I don't really have a problem with the size. As far as the historic register, the barn wasn't ever designated as part of the historic elements of that house, so I'm not concerned too much with the look of it. I do like the suggestions of the rest of the committee to have some architectural features brought into it, and I would personally be willing to approve this with the condition that they work with Mr. Moore on some architectural features, and I have every faith and confidence that he will do what's necessary to make that look as best as possible to blend in with the historic elements of that farm.
Would it be all right with the commission if I asked the applicant a couple questions? If we're
Absolutely.
going to be talking about architectural features.
Please.
With the roof on the building, you have the roof pitch going east to west. The older building on the photo I have up has the roof pitch going north to south. Looking at your building dimensions, being a 50 by 53, would it be possible to flip the trusses to run like the old building did, where you have more roof line visible from the street? I'm thinking if that instance, you could do a dormer on the front of the building like what's here.
Right.
The only reason, I don't see a reason why I couldn't without talking to my architect about it. I don't see a reason I couldn't. The only reason I was going the other direction was to match the pitch of the standing structure that's there,
Correct.
and just going for a more seamless look. I don't see a reason I couldn't rotate it. That would have to be a conversation I need to have with the architect and make sure that there's no reason not to. That was just my biggest concern, was making a nice even roof line and making sure gutters and everything like that flowed correctly, and just
Sure.
had,
Because I'm just looking at what you have submitted in this graphic here, and there's not a single window on the entire building. There's not even windows like in this oversized garage door. It's I guess like a bright white box kind of stands out on the overall building design. Those are the types of things that I would feel uncomfortable having that one-on-one discussion with the applicant without understanding.
and I can get, and this was, once again, the limited art capabilities. The garage door that was, that would be ordered would be actually in the same color as the trim to make it all look more cohesive. The current structure with how that truss design would work, the load-bearing walls would be the two side walls, not the front and back. So it wouldn't be hard to add in windows and trim that out and the farm style of the one-bys around them to give that farm feel. Honestly, I would do windows, I would like to add windows to this project. It was a little worry of security, but, you know, I can elevate the windows a bit there, and then do that one-by trim, along with doing that kind of trim on the old barn that was basically bordered all of the walls and around the windows, including around the garage door and things like that. Basically adding that white trim, doing that in the same color that was proposed for the building, and bringing that around the door, the man door, the garage door, adding some windows just to make it look like a much nicer building.
And then was the siding on the building, I apologize, like you said, the renderings are kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, sorry.
The application didn't specify, was this a corrugated metal siding and corrugated metal roof? Or you mentioned the board and batten,
So-
was that just the water table, the last 3 feet of the building? Or is the siding a metal board and batten siding, because they make both products?
So the board and batten portion, the lower portion, right now would be 4 foot tall. And it is out of PVC trim, so I don't have to worry about rot and things like that using painted wood. It would be a satin finish metal building above the board and batten, but the board and batten itself would be PVC trim. All of the window casing, door casing, and everything like that would also be PVC trim to match.
Okay.
All of that would be painted and finished correctly, including adding that to the original structure, and then mimicking that. When we paint the original structure, we're gonna ideally paint the small car, the small carriage house to mimic this, so it's all uniform.
So it'd be a corrugated siding and roof besides the PVC trim? Not a standing seam roof or a, like they have metal lap siding, they have metal board and batten siding. A corrugated is what's on the roof of this building. That would be the roof and siding material spec'd in this instance?
The roof is the siding, I cannot remember the technical term for it. It is the more squared off. I do interior, not.
That'd be the same roof that's on this building, is a corrugated material. I guess my preference would be for the applicant to come back with more information for your review, because my suggestion would be to have it be a board and batten metal sided, if you guys are comfortable with the metal siding, because it's an insulated product. It has a backer board right behind it, and it looks like a board and batten material. And then a standing seam metal roof would be more architecturally significant to a historic barn building than, like the roof on this building's terrible. It doesn't match the character of this building at all.
I can actually give you the.
So that might be something, I think, you know, my level of detail comments
Right.
with him one-on-one would be, I
Right.
think, a lot greater than what you guys would have, and that's my concern with leaving it up to staff. If it's up just to say paint the building red, I can do that, but going anything beyond that, I think, is a little beyond my scope. And that's why I wanted to have the discussion with the applicant, with you guys here, that you could see what kind of rabbit hole it could get into if I'm working outside of my scope with the applicant.
So at this time, would we table and you work with staff and the applicant to come back with additional features and
Drawings.
drawings based on our conversation this evening? And
Sure, if that's.
Yeah, I hate to do that, but I honestly, given the quantity of items that are up in the air, it
Yeah.
doesn't seem fair to either the applicant or Andrew. So,
Yeah, I want to make sure they know what you want to do.
Yeah,
at
that's
the end
fine.
of the day.
but I do like that, you know, some of the recommendations, I would continue with the recommendations that you're suggesting as a starting point, and then that way the applicant can see if that matches budget and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
availability, and then we'd just like to see all the pieces come together.
yeah, and appreciate the dialogue and
Yeah,
Yes, thank
of
you.
information tonight.
Yeah,
All right,
Give me a
thank
call
you.
tomorrow and we can go over, if you want us to stop by to go
Yeah.
over it, or if you just want me to shoot you an email with I'll just mark up on this drawing, like I
Okay.
do with our,
Don't we have to-
I sit on our architecture review board for the city, so I can
Okay.
put stuff together for you just to give you a head start for these guys.
Yeah.
And Mr. Carr, are you okay tabling till
Yeah,
next month?
yeah, that's fine. I completely understand the concerns and things like that. And I mean, it's part of the process. It's not the fun answer, but it's
Fortunately or
the understandable
unfortunately, yeah.
answer.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll need a motion to table.
Motion to table variance VA-23-002.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Deeds, second by Ms. Gooden. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wallenthaler?
Yes,
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes,
Mr. Deeds, yes. Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes.
Motion or variance is tabled.
Thank you. The next application on tonight's agenda is VA 23-003. The address of the subject property is 8075 Howe Industrial Parkway. The applicant is requesting this evening a variance from Chapter 1185 to increase the access drive to 30 feet in width for the new project going on this parcel. The proposed site is a 2.09 acre lot on the south side of Howe Industrial Parkway and is zoned limited manufacturing. All surrounding properties are in Canal Point Industrial Park and are zoned limited manufacturing. The applicant is requesting approval to construct a 15,000 square foot office warehouse building for Accurate Electric. The site is proposed to have one access drive on the western side of the property for both employee and truck access. This access drive is shown as 30 feet in width. Chapter 1185 regulates access drives, states that access drives shall be a maximum of 25 feet in width except for at curb returns. The applicant notes in their application that majority of the access drives within the industrial park are at the greater 30-foot in width. This is to help keep the larger truck traffic from curbing, going in the grass, making the transition from the street onto the site smoother. And that because almost all adjacent properties have a 30-foot access drive, this variance does not produce any undue privilege or negatively affect health or safety for people in the vicinity and would actually improve the health and safety for people in the vicinity. To that regard, staff agrees with the applicant. This variance request is requested by most industrial users that have an 18-wheeler for any type of delivery service or any type of warehousing, loading, unloading service. Given the nature of the project, the only times that the wider access drive is not really necessary is when the road is wide enough that someone can actually swing out of their lane to make a wider turn into the site. Howe Industrial Parkway unfortunately only has a 70-foot right-of-way, and you need something about 85 feet to make up for that difference in the 10-foot and the apron that they're requesting, or 5 feet in the apron they're requesting. So staff is recommending that variance VA 23-003 be approved as presented.
Questions for staff?
no,
Anything the applicant wishes to add? I'll now open it up for public comment.
I move we close public comment.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Willenthaler, second by Mr. Cosgrove. Roll call?
Mr. Wallenthaler?
Yes,
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
yes,
Mr. Deeds, yes. Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes.
Motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve VA-23-003 as presented.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Willenthaler, second by Mr. Deeds. Roll call?
Mr. Wallenthaler?
Yes,
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
yes,
Mr. Deeds, yes. Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes.
Variance is approved.
The next application on tonight's agenda is Site Development Plan 23-002. This is a request for a 15,000 square foot office / warehouse building for Accurate Electric. Up on the screen is a site plan produced by the applicant for their proposed project. This site is zoned limited manufacturing It has the following setbacks: a front yard setback of 50 feet, side of 25 feet, and a rear yard of 25 feet. The proposed application exceeds all the minimum setback requirements that are in the limited manufacturing zoning district. The site plan calls for a 30-foot access drive into the site. That would be for the employee parking and truck parking to the rear. Variance VA 23-003 was just approved, allowing a 30-foot access drive. The zoning code requires a total of 46 parking spaces for the proposed building size and office/warehouse breakdowns. 26 parking stalls in the front would meet the requirement for the office space, and the 20 in the rear meets the requirement for the warehousing component on the back of the building. The applicant has a dashed line through the middle of the building, just shows the breakdown between office and industrial warehousing space in the rear. Chapter 1185 also requires either one Class A and one Class B or 3 Class B loading spaces for the building. The applicant is providing 3 overhead doors, 1 on the side and 2 on the rear, 2 on the side and 1 on the rear, meeting this requirement. On this plan sheet, the applicant's also showing a 6-foot tall black chain link fence that will secure the rear loading zone and fleet parking on the property. The style and height of the fence meets our zoning requirements. When looking at the utility plan, the applicant is proposing for a 1-inch service tap. That's the blue line that will tap the line on Howe Industrial Parkway. The green is for the sanitary, and the red shows the private storm system for the property. The site has adequate access to utilities. Regarding for the stormwater, the applicant is requesting from our public service director a variance for a dry detention basin with a concrete channel. The reason for the dry detention variance is due to the outlet for this site leads into Howe Pond, which is on the north side of the site. The outlet has a set elevation, and to lower the basin for this site any lower than the site wouldn't discharge properly into that outlet. A similar situation is to the property directly to the west for Lifestyle Flooring, which is approved in 2020, I believe. They have a similar concrete channel dry basin system that's interconnected with this red storm system here on this site. And this is the dry basin of the concrete channel circled in blue. Again, similar to the one directly next door in front of Lifestyle Flooring. The applicant has provided a landscape plan. They've noted that 23 trees are to be planted on site at 2-inch caliber breast height, meeting our code requirements. The applicant is also showing parking lot screening along the north and east side of this front lot, meeting the screening requirements. The deviation and breakdown of the trees has been reviewed by our urban forester. He had no comments, meeting the requirements for the species for the proposed plantings. The applicant has provided a lighting plan for the site. The light poles are 15-foot tall and a 3-foot concrete base. The light photometrics has been provided, showing that it meets our spillage requirements, and that the applicant is proposing to have only one parking lot light at the front of the facility. The rest of the building will be illuminated via wall packs. When looking at the elevations, the applicant provides information on all 4 sides for construction type. This will be a metal sided building and will have a fiber cement horizontal siding front entry feature and at the corner of the building. And there will be a split faced block water table around the perimeter of the building. This construction type is very similar to others in the surrounding industrial park. It's maybe one of 2 that have a fiber cement entry. Some of the other ones have a stone facade or a different detailed metal siding facade. So the applicant's looking to do something a little different in this front, but it's well within what's permitted for the area. The applicant has provided some color renderings showing that design, showing the office space has windows throughout that go floor to ceiling. The Canal Point Industrial Park allows for some non-monochromatic colors in areas like awnings and signage, as the applicant's showing some brightly colored awnings. Information on kind of where they plan to put signage is on the building, but no signage package has been submitted for the commission's review at this time. Now here's just another perspective of the front of the building. This rendering does show the basin is wet. This would only be a case if it was actively raining on the site when you went out to look at it. Otherwise, it would be just grass. Looking at the rear of the building here, that one loading dock, the applicant did note that they have the rendering showing the fence in steel silver to make it easy to see, or else it would wash out in all the printed copies, making it black. Looking at the other side of the building here inside the fenced-in zone. So staff is recommending that the site development plan SDP 23-002 be approved with the condition that the applicant receives the variance for the stormwater design manual from the public service director for the dry detention area.
Questions
from the
for
commission?
staff? Anything the applicant wishes to add?
Well, I'd just like to say good evening. I'm Rich Ireland, Dublin Building Systems. I've got the owners of Accurate Electric with me if you want to ask them any questions, but I have nothing to add, just to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you. This is our last lot, unfortunately.
Any discussion or motion?
It seems like a pretty good design and checks all the boxes, so other than the one variance.
So the chain link fence is actually going to be black?
Yeah.
Vinyl coated black.
Okay.
So it looks really sharp, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move the site development plan SDP-23-002 for Accurate Electric be approved with the conditions noted.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Paulsgrove, second by Mr. Wildenthaler. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wildenthaler.
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Gooden.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds, yes. Mr. Paulsgrove.
Yes.
Application is approved. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
We learned a lot, though.
Welcome to the
I
neighborhood.
know, it's like, good to see you.
We would have wired the guy's bar.
Where are you currently located at? Where are you currently located
I'm
at?
on, off Americana.
Okay.
In Columbus, so they're moving.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Well, me and him are from around here. He lives in, now I live out by Rockville.
Well, welcome.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Ah, that might be it.
But you, yeah, Cameron, here's Cameron.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, yes. It's, but I see faces and like, but great. I know, you're exactly right. Thank you.
For old new business, brief update on the comprehensive plan workshop number 2. We had that meeting at the end of February, a 2-day event, Wednesday, Thursday event. The Wednesday event was very well attended. In the morning meetings, we had, I think, 35 people from the public that attended that meeting. Provided really good feedback. Most of the people stayed throughout the entire day. I think Rick Deeds had a cot in the back, and he was here most of the time. Joe was here a couple for the events. So it was, I thought, a really well attended event. The group, they actually reached out to a lot of the people personally that felt that their opinions are heard of in the community. I asked them to actually come to this meeting. We had a few of those folks show up, which I think was helpful for them. That was the last public engagement component for the plan. The consultants are working on putting together a draft for the steering committee's review. That draft would be sent out in the next, I'm assuming, 3-4 weeks. And then there's going to be a meeting with the steering committee in the third Thursday in April to kind of take a look at that draft. I know there's already been some email chatter in the steering committee, kind of taking a look at what they're expecting to see. What staff would like to do is really have a big hands-on review on that draft. Take a fine-tooth comb through it before it gets out to the steering committee. That way you guys are reviewing already edited information that makes it as good as possible. Really my goal for this draft review is you guys are more like editors and you're not manipulating content, so to speak. You'll be, hopefully it'll be streamlined to that point where you guys will be talking about flow of the document. We'll be talking about like how it reads. The whole goal of it is it will read at, a junior high level. It'll be really graphic. And if you want to know more information, you can look at appendices to find it, but the document itself needs to be self-sustaining on its own. So that's the challenge that the consultants have at this point, is to take a year's worth of stuff and try to condense it down to 100 pages for the whole community. Once the steering committee gets that draft approved, it'll come to the Planning and Zoning Commission for presentation. Hopefully we have a light agenda to just attach that onto. If not, we'll see if we can do like a special meeting to just talk about the comp plan project. And then you guys will make a recommendation to City Council on that. In looking at other kind of old new business, I introduced Eileen when she wasn't here last month. But we were able to snag Eileen from the steering committee for the community plan. She's been a really great asset in that project. And now I have 3 from the steering committee on P&Z. So I hit my cap, so I can't steal anybody else from that board. But it's been really helpful. So at least she's walking in this room knowing 2 faces and not having to meet a bunch of different people at once. I think you did great tonight, by the way. Just you actually interjected your thoughts and ideas at your first meeting. That's, I think, really hard to do. And I think, these guys will tell you that. So thank you. When looking at, that's what I had for old business. For new business, Luke needs somebody appointed from Planning and Zoning Commission to serve on the CRA Housing Council. The CRA Housing Council reviews 1 annual meeting in March, all tax abated properties, and then with Luke, of course, and the group of the council, and you guys get to do a tour of some of the tax abated properties. I get to go through the insides of the buildings, figure out what they do, and you have a more hands-on approach on how many employees they have, what they exactly do in this facility. So something like Accurate Electric would be on the review for the Housing Council in 25. And then they have a 15-year time frame. They're up for that tax exemption to be active. The Housing Council does have the authority to remove a tax exemption from a property if they find they're not meeting whatever status quo they're supposed to. But Luke asked for me to get somebody to nominate for that this evening. Doesn't have to be during this meeting, but if someone's interested, stick around for a little bit. The tour is on March 30th this year, and it'll be from 8 to 4, so it'll be all day. That is a 3-year commitment to be on the Housing Council. You do not have to be a current P&Z member, I don't believe, to, like, if you roll off P&Z, you can still be on the council. But there needs to be an appointment from Planning and Zoning to be on it.
The housing council is made up of who? I mean, this is all the.
So there's a member of Planning and Zoning, there's a member of.
Is it just specific for Canal Winchester though?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Correct. Yes. And we actually have more properties that rolled off than are coming on, so the list is getting shorter. But like the new industrial buildings off of Bixby Road, that's on the list. Any property in Old Town that has an abatement for improvements. A lot of the businesses in Canal Point are on that. Some of the bigger ones like NIFCO, their main headquarters just rolled off 2 years ago, but their new building's on. So I think you guys will do a tour through NIFCO. If anyone's ever been in that building, it's really cool. See what actual robotic hand movements can do with tool and dyeing parts. They have a clean room where they all wear like white smocks and masks and hair nets, that way they don't get like, their fingerprints on stuff, so. I was on the housing council for the first 3 years of my employment here. I think it's a really good educational experience. So that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So let's adjourn and we can appoint if someone's interested after. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Paulsgrove, second by Mr. Deeds. Roll call?
Mr. Wildenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds, yes. Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
Timeout 8:10 PM.
Is it always on the